Now, Palestinian emergency services say tens of thousands of civilians are trapped without access to food or medical supplies in northern Gaza. Israel has been ramping up its offensive against Hamas in the area. The siege has many worried Israel may be implementing the so-called general's plan, which would force anyone left in the north to evacuate and surrender or starve.
Israel's intensified assault has led tens of thousands of Palestinians to flee the north of Gaza. The UN says many of those remaining are worried if they leave, they'll never be allowed to return. Human rights groups echo that fear. The evacuation orders and siege tactics have them worried Israel has quietly begun implementing the so-called general's plan. It calls for the northern third of the Strip, including Gaza City, to be cut off and declared a military zone. Anyone left behind would be treated as an enemy combatant. It states Israel should maintain control over the north for an indefinite period and create a new administration without Hamas, splitting the Gaza Strip into two. The chief architect of the proposal is this man, a former head of the Israeli National Security Council.
They should be given, 10 days to leave through safe corridors that Israel will provide. And after that time, all this area will become to be a military zone. And all the Hamas people who will still there, whether some of them are fighters, some of them are civilians, they will have two choices, either to surrender or to starve.
Ireland is part of a group of retired generals frustrated that a year into the war, Israel has not achieved its aims of destroying Hamas and freeing the remaining hostages. They believe the plan would break what's left of Hamas and lead it to free the surviving hostages. The plan was made public last month. It was immediately condemned by human rights groups. Scholars have also questioned its legality. During a recent visit to the region, the U.S. Secretary of State says he was personally assured by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that Israel is not carrying out the plan.
With regard to the so-called general's plan in the north, let me just say again, first, the United States fully and fundamentally rejects it. Second, as I told you the other day, the government of Israel says that it is not the policy of Israel and also rejects the plan.
The U.S. has threatened to cut weapons deliveries to Israel if it does not step up and speed up the flow of aid into northern Gaza.
For more on this story, let's bring in Nomi Bar-Yaacov. She is an international human rights lawyer, negotiator and mediator at Chatham House in London. Nomi, as we've seen in this report, human rights groups fear Israel is already implementing this plan in northern Gaza. What do you make of those fears?
Well, I think there's a lot of ground for the fear. We're seeing that evacuation orders are continuously being issued, and some families have been evacuated more than 10 times, and they're displaced into areas where they no longer have any humane conditions. I met with a number of eyewitnesses who visited the Gaza Strip last week, and they were visiting London, and they stated that the situation is very clearly inhumane. So some women, they said, didn't even have underwear because they had just left in their clothes, and there is just nowhere for them to get it. So clearly, the situation is beyond catastrophic, and it is illegal to, carry out forceful evacuations in this manner. And a solution needs to be found. And really the only solution is to put pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu to accept the Egyptian proposal on the table, which is being discussed in Doha today. So, the wars need to end, and there has to be a ceasefire. The hostages, all of them, 101 of them dead and alive, need to come home, because these forced evacuations are not going to stop unless there is a ceasefire.
You mentioned the hostages there. Proponents of the so-called general's plan believe that this would help get the hostages back alive. Do you agree with that?
I don't think, actually, I beg to differ, Ole, with a lot of respect. I don't think that's what the authors of the plan think. I think that the myth or the lie that military pressure, depending on how you want to look at it, the military pressure is going to bring the hostages back has been proven wrong. It's well over a year now, and 101 hostages, that's a very, very large number, have some of them in their 80s. Some of them were 7 months when they were kidnapped. I think I don't think anyone in Israel, including the general, believes that military pressure is going to bring the hostages back. And it's been stated very clearly by the chief of staff, by the minister of defense. I mean, Prime Minister Netanyahu, for his own reasons, is keen to prolong the war. Today was the opening of the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, after a very long summer recess, which included the period of the so-called high holidays. The New Year and Yom Kippur and Sukkot. And the first speech, and he talks about a great potential new alliance that he's envisaging with Arab states now that he feels, that potentially some of them are on his side. Not one word about the hostages, Oleg, not one. He did not mention the hostages today in his opening speech.
Thank you very much for your analysis. That's Nomi Bar-Yaacov with Chatham House in London.
Thank you, Ole, for having me on the show.
Let's bring in Harel Chorev, a historian and Middle East analyst at Tel Aviv University. Welcome to DW. You've expressed support for the general's plan. In your words, what is the plan and what is the goal?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
I would like you to tell us what the general's plan is and what the goal is of the plan.
Well, the plan, which was planned according to international law, and General Ireland emphasized it many, many times, basically says we need to think about the day after. And the day after is an area which is cleaned up from Hamas militants, which we know it's still a problem, and to provide by ourselves or by any other agency aid to the people. At the moment, this aid is being taken by Hamas, who is also earning a lot of money of it. And for this, we need to do some sort of a model. So the plan basically suggests that the northern part of Gaza will be the pilot for it, while as we just heard from General Ireland himself, allowing the civilians to leave. And by the way, they are living in masses already. I think we are already over 50,000 people out of 120. And to leave just the militant, or when they try to escape, to monitor them and to take them out from among the civilians, which is also happening too. I think we have something like 600 people who were already arrested while they were trying to go with the civilians.
Let me just interject there. Let me just quickly interject there. Even if Israel asks civilians to leave, some people will choose to stay. And depriving civilians of essentials like food and water, even in a besieged area, is prohibited under international law. What will happen to those people?
It's not prohibited if you allow them to leave. Now, if they are being captured by the Hamas militant, that's a different issue, of course. But I need to remind our viewers that, in Rafah, for example, which, as you probably remember, was a major issue before it was taken by the IDF, from Rafah, they evacuated not 120,000, but rather 800,000. And it was conducted perfectly. They moved to the Muwasi area, to the area where they are safe, and provided with all the food and aid that they needed. So it worked then. They shouldn't, there shouldn't be a problem that it would work in this case as well.
But we have again and again heard from civilians in North Gaza saying they will not leave. So again, how will Israel protect the civilians who decide to stay?
Well, they are supposed to leave, and they are leaving, as I said, en masses. The whole fighting, this takes us to the fighting practices of the IDF in the north. We're fighting against the guerrilla forces, so it's not a massive battles like we are used to from conventional wars. This also allows a more specific kind of targeting, which is supposed to be cautious with the civilians' lives that for some reason remain there. But again, the case of Jabalia shouldn't be different from the case of Rafah, only by the difference that there are much less civilians in that area in comparison to what we had in Rafah, and still it worked. And as we saw, there was a lot of things in Rafah that justified its conquest, including Sinwar himself.
Let me ask you, I'm curious, what about the Hamas fighters? How do we know that the militants won't leave when the civilians evacuate? And how do we prevent them from regrouping in the south, in your opinion?
You're absolutely right. Some of them are trying to leave. Some of them are killed already. I think over 700 are killed already in battles with the IDF. By the way, posing a major challenge to the IDF, because every second house is charged. Every second house is with a lot of explosives. Some of them from mislaunch of the IDF that the Hamas reused as charges. But some of them are trying to escape with the civilians. Now, by all kinds of technique, including face recognition and of course, other means of intelligence, the Shin Bet and the IDF are pulling them out from the ranks from those lines of civilians that are marching there. And many of them are indeed even Nukhba terrorists who participated October 7, people that we know who they are. Their faces were already, recognized by the systems, and they were taken out from among the civilians. By the way, a very interesting phenomena, which can be easily, seen on those lines, that you see mainly women, children, but not too many men. Namely, they are leaving their men behind. And that, of course, tells us a lot about the population, the composition of Hamas militants among the civilians. These are basically their families. So I'm happy that they're allowing them to go out. But, at the end of the day, if we want to get information on our hostages, and they are providing a lot of information on our hostages, I guess some of the information will be published very soon. And if we want to allow a day after post-war any kind of a program or agenda, we just have to root out Hamas and by doing it, of course, by national law.
That was Harel. Thank you very much, Harel Chorev, Middle East analyst at Tel Aviv University. Thank you for your contribution.
Thank you very much.